Okay, so this has been on my timeline for the last few days. Apparently, the live-action Lilo and Stitch movie, live-action in air quotes, has finally come out. I barely noticed because I really couldn't care less, but why am I making this video then? Well, you'll see. So this has been on my timeline. Lilo and Stitch earned $55 million in the film's domestic opening day. The film is tracking to have the biggest Memorial Day opening weekend of all time. Bleak. When I saw this, I rolled my eyes and I was like, oh great, that's fantastic. More live-action Disney slop making money. They're just perfect. But I was like, okay, you know, maybe it'll peter off. Nope. What happened then is literally the same day, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning and Lilo and Stitch have both already passed $100 million globally. This weekend's trying to be the biggest Memorial Day weekend in movie history. I'm like, okay, well, at least Mission Impossible is at least doing well. But the fact that this movie is already doing better than Mission Impossible, I'm like, it's just the consumerism, huh? Like, people saw Stitch and went, oh, Stitch, I remember Stitch from when I was a kid. I remember Stitch. It was then the next day that I saw this. The live-action Lilo and Stitch remake has already earned more than the animated movie. Now, to be fair, that's not really a hard bar to clear. Movies are just more expensive to go see than they were back in the day, so the fact that it surpassed the animated one is really not hard, but the film opened to $341.7 million globally. And then it got worse with Lilo and Stitch had the biggest domestic opening for a movie ever on Memorial Day weekend with $187 million. And then to add even more insult to injury, Lilo and Stitch had the fourth biggest domestic box office gross on a Monday ever, beating No Way Home and Avengers Endgame. Now I know partly it'll also be due to like inflation and stuff, because stuff is just more expensive, so you're gonna gross more, but like, and I'm gonna say, we were on the verge of greatness. We were this close. Because if you remember the live-action Snow White that came out this year as well, that absolute travesty, with a 1.7 on IMDb and a 40% Rotten Tomatoes. Obviously, the IMDb score might be a little misleading. Like, this movie was review bomb. Not that it's a good movie. This movie should get a low rating, but it's probably not this low. Either way, so Rachel Zegler's Snow White, it did bad. Like, it did really bad, especially if we compare here. Estimated box office, Snow White had a budget of about 240 to 270 million, one of Disney's most expensive movies just ever, not even a remake. And it only made estimated $205.4 million, which means it bombed. Disney tried to salvage this because a couple days later, or like a week later, whatever, Disney re-released Snow White in films for a second run, because that worked out so well for Sony with Morbius. It was shown in about 1,300 theaters across the United States and only made $335,000. So I was curious. I was like, wait a minute, how much did it actually make? So let's pull up the handy calculator here real quick. $335,000 for 1,300 theaters, which means it made about $257 a theater. And I was like, okay, the average price for a movie ticket in the US according to 2025 is around $16.08. So I'd say $16. Now obviously it varies by city, but for the average it's $16. So if we divide this by 16, that means that for the re-release of Snow White, an average of about 16 people per theater. You know, massive flop. And I'm pretty sure that Disney even said that they were reconsidering doing live actions because this one was so bad. I was jumping on my seat. I was like, the plague is over. The scourge has left us. No more live action in air quotes movies, because they're not really live action. They're 90% CGI. They're CGI fests. They just go from animation to 3D animation that we're passing off for live action because it sounds cool, I guess. And that was until I saw Lilo and Stitch's box office. Let's look at this real quick. Lilo and Stitch cost $100 million to make, which I still can't believe they couldn't even include Gantu in the movie, even with this budget. And it's already made $361.2 million. They've literally already gotten over 300% return on their investment. So Disney was about to give up the live action game, and lo and behold, we're getting live actions forever. Like the slop will continue. What makes me even more sad is the fact that if you look at the ratings, a 69% critic score, by the way, nice. The fact that the audience rating, why is this page look like this? That the audience rating for this is a 93%. That just makes me so sad, because it just shows that, like, you don't need to make new stuff. You don't need to have good writing. You can just microwave old properties, just serve the secondhand reheated slop, and people will go, I recognize that, and there we go. Disney's not going to learn any lesson from it. They were digging themselves a hole with Snow White, and they kept digging. They didn't stop. They just kept digging, and even though they were digging themselves a hole, they somehow were rewarded for doing that with literally just making all their money back. They kept digging themselves a hole and somehow struck gold that they shouldn't have been able to. Yet we're never getting rid of these live-action remakes, which make me so upset because apparently they're planning a live-action Tangled remake, and I don't want them to touch that movie. But yeah, enough of this depressing stuff. I'm done, and I'll see you in the next video.